Welcome to the HOLEX Digital ACE Teaching with Google Workspace webinar. The Digital ACE project is designed to support ACE providers on the next stage of their technological journey. So it's all about extending your digital capabilities and improving your confidence so that you can improve what you deliver to learners. And there is a link there at the bottom of the slide for more information. And there's loads of fantastic resources on the slide as well. So I highly recommend exploring that link. The purpose of today's session is to explore some practical ways that Google Workspace can be used to deliver online teaching. We're specifically going to cover how to increase your knowledge of Google Workspace components and how they can be used in online teaching. And we're going to try and gather up lots of ideas and tips and tricks for using Google tools to elevate your teaching, both online and in person. So this will be a bit of a whistle-stop tour around everything that Google Workspace has to offer in terms of the real kind of big ticket items that are very effective in terms of making online teaching smooth and effective and engaging. So welcome from me then. My name's Sarah Bradley. I work for Buckinghamshire Adult Learning as the Digital Skills Maths and English Coordinator. My background is computer science and business. I'm also a qualified secondary school teacher, and I've got Google Educator Level 1 and 2, and I'm also a Google for Education certified trainer. So when we talk about online teaching, of course, we're imagining virtual teaching in the context of COVID and so on. But when we move from online teaching back into a classroom, it's a really easy transition for us. Everything that we do online just sort of naturally moves back into a class. But when we move from an in-class environment to online, it's a very difficult transition. So it's hard for us to sort of picture, well, if I was handing people paper, how does that now look when I teach online? So the thing to keep in mind when we're looking at using technology to elevate our online teaching is that all the advantages that we gather from technology will transfer naturally back into our classrooms. So the ability to have everything saved in one place, the ability to access more learners via more routes and be more flexible in our delivery is all still kept. And also our evidence capture, our ability to actually record progress and our ability to have contingency plans and cope with absences, disruptions, things like that. Everything that we do online, it's not a temporary fix. We're not learning any of this in a temporary way. And the advantages and the skills that we pick up are going to transfer back into the classroom. So really, I just wanted to set the tone with that even though we're talking about online teaching, what we're really talking about is digital teaching, and that does have a place both in our classrooms and online. So if we orient ourselves then to Google Workspace, so Google Workspace up until recently was called G Suite, so you might see that word around as well, but Google Workspace and Google G Suite are synonymous, and all they really are is just the collection of applications that Google provides. Now, in terms of education, Google offer Google for Education, which is the free version. That's what my organisation uses. And there's also Google Education Enterprise Edition, which is a paid service and has some additional features. And I will touch on a couple of those as we go along, but just to sort of let you know that there are some differences in terms of what's available between the two. So we access the Google Workspace apps through the waffle, which is an icon made up of 9 dots, which you can see in the middle of the screen there. And you'll be able to find that anytime you're on a Google website. So if you go to google.com or if you go to Gmail, you'll be able to see your waffle up at the top right, and you can click on it there, and it works like an app drawer on your phone, and it opens up a list of all the applications that are available to you. So I just wanted to draw attention before we kick off, just a small point of note to do with Google Dots. So whenever you're logged into Google, you will get a dot with either your face or your initial showing you which account you're logged into. And I wanted to draw your attention that when you're in Chrome, which is Google's web browser, and obviously Google applications will work in other web browsers, but they are tested best with Google's own web browser. So where possible, I do suggest using Chrome. When you're logged in to Chrome, you will be logged in with one of your Google accounts. And when you go to any individual website, such as Gmail or your Google Drive, you could be logged into a different Google account. And that's what I've shown you here in the circle on this slide. So you'll see at the top, my top dot, which is in the outer frame of the Chrome web browser. So everything works in frames, everything works in windows, if you like. And you can see that there's a picture of my face, and that's my personal Google account that I've actually logged into the browser with. You'll notice I've then got a dot lower down. So on this particular website, which happened to be Gmail, I'm actually logged in with my work account, which is the pink dot with the letter S in. So it's possible to be logged into Chrome with one Google account, but to be accessing Google services with a different account. The reason I'm mentioning that is because this might happen for your learners. So whether or not your organization assigns learners a specific email address or whether you allow them to use their own, you may face the issue that your learners get a little bit muddled with which account they're in. So as professionals, as tutors, I highly recommend that you set up 2 Chrome instances, one that logs in with your personal, one that logs in with your work, and you don't cross the 2 over. And I will provide you some instructions embedded within the presentation for how to do that if you're interested. In terms of what we do, if we need to switch accounts, it's very simple in Google. All you need to do is click on the dot, and it will then give you a list of accounts, and you then have the choice of switching accounts. So for example, you can see at the top here, I'm logged into Chrome for this presentation with my work account. And if I click on that, I've then got an option to switch accounts to some of the other Google accounts that have used this machine before me. So anytime you need to switch, you can just click on the dot and change the account that you're in. So starting points. If this was a live session, I would now give you a survey just to find out what you're currently using. And I wanted to share the results of one of the previous sessions with you because it's fairly representative. So G Suite tools that I were asked about are things like Gmail, Classroom, Drive, Docs, Slides and Sheets, Forms, Meet and Jam. And if you just want to take a second to just see if your usage sort of roughly matches the results here on the screen. What was interesting to me is that the Jam usage and the Forms usage was surprisingly low given what powerful tools they are. So if that's reflective of your experience as well, then that's fantastic because I will touch on those as we go along as well. So the applications that Google offers us, obviously there's a lot more than I've shown on this screen, but these are the ones that are particularly useful to us and good starter apps in terms of our teaching. They're very reliable and we need them for everything. So they're a really good place to start. So Chrome is our web browser that's provided by Google, and we suggest that that is a good one to use because it's well tested with all the Google apps. But as I said before, if you're using Safari, if you're using Edge, Brave, DuckDuckGo, any other browsers, the Google applications should by and large work perfectly fine. So we've got Gmail and Calendar, which you'll be well familiar with. We've got Classroom, which you may be using or it may be new to you. Drive, it underpins everything you do. Drive is your cloud storage, and even if you don't think that you're actively using Drive, you are using Drive all the time, because every time you do anything in Google, anytime you create, then it is saving to Drive. So whether or not you know you're using it is an absolutely essential part of the Google Workspace. Docs, Slides and Sheets are the equivalents of Microsoft's Word, PowerPoint and Excel, and they have a lot of crossover. They're very, very similar. And if you have skills in one, then your skills will transfer to the other. Forms is for quizzes and surveys. It's a really, really powerful piece of software. Meet is for video conferencing. I'm using it just now to record this, and it's used for live classes and that sort of thing. Jam is interactive whiteboarding, a really powerful tool, very simple to use, great one to start with learners. And Keep is post-it notes, which is the sort of unsung hero of Google, but it's incredibly useful, and I do recommend exploring some of the ways that can be used. The other two pieces of software I just want to mention, they're not made by Google, these last two, but they integrate very, very well with it, are Screencastify for video clips and Mote for audio feedback, and I will just mention those a little bit later as well. So that's our universe of Google tools that we want to explore today. Let's take a step back and look at the components of your teaching before COVID. So if you're taking notes, feel free to jot some bits and pieces down. Otherwise, just have a bit of a think about what your teaching actually consisted of when you were in the classroom. And what I mean by that is, did you do demonstrations? Do you model outcomes for learners? Do you use presentations? Is there class discussion and debate? And did you use a whiteboard, a physical or electronic whiteboard, such as ProWise? Did you use group discussion, small groups and pair work? And what types of resources did you physically give to learners? Was it pieces of paper? Was it materials? And how did learners demonstrate their understanding to you? How did they complete tasks? Was it with pen and paper? Was it with, again, practical materials? Was it with their body if you were a fitness tutor, and so on? And how did you assess learners? And how did you record that assessment? And lastly, how do you feed back to learners? And the reason for thinking about these mechanisms is because, as I mentioned before, it's all about transition. How do we transition our teaching skills from in-class to online? And this is where software tools help us, because they give us options. They're not the same, we have to adapt, but they help us to transfer our skills into a digital environment. So, for example, doing demonstrations and modelling outcomes for learners is something, of course, we can still do via video calls. It's still an option. Presenting, we can still potentially do. Some of the things here are more difficult than others. Pair work is really tricky online, but it is possible. Whiteboarding, such as Jam, I'll explain to you a little bit later as well. It gives us some really good options, and learners demonstrating understanding and completing their tasks. We might have to change the way that we do it, but it is still possible with technology. So that's what we just need to be thinking about, is what are we actually trying to recreate here? What are the really great things that we do that we want to now move digitally, and how can the software tools help us to do that? So I'm just going to give you a very quick practical roadmap for tutors. So if you're new to Google, this is the order that I would recommend that you pick up the Google tools. So I'll just whisk through this and then we'll go into detail on each of the components as we go. So I would suggest starting with the classroom stream. I would then move on to Google Meet, which is the virtual conferencing software. I then introduce Jam, which is the whiteboarding software, to my learners. I then start using classroom materials on my classroom. Then I would brush up my skills with slides and docs and start looking at collaborative documents with my learners. Then I'd bring in classroom assignments. Next would be forms for surveys and quizzes. And then lastly, tools and extensions. And all of this would be underpinned by using Calendar, Drive and Gmail. And these three at the bottom, Calendar, Drive and Gmail, are absolutely integral to everything that we do with Google. Obviously, Gmail, I know you'll be well familiar with, and Calendar probably as well. But there's lots of different ways that these are used. So, for example, you may have a Google Calendar because of your Google account, but you've also, for example, got a classroom calendar. So whenever you set up a new class in Google Classroom, it has its own calendar, for example. And Drive, as I mentioned before, you are using all the time, whether you know it or not, because everything that you do is saving to Drive, whether it's creating a form, creating a slide, opening up a shared document, all of that is then being captured on your Drive, on your cloud storage. So what we'll do is we're going to step through one by one and go through some of the tips and tricks and just kind of give you an explanation of what they are, why they're useful, and hopefully if you are an expert user already, give you a couple of extra expert tips. So I'm hoping you will still get something new from it. So what I'm going to do this, we'll start with the classroom stream, is I'm going to split my screen for you. And I'm just going to keep our presentation to the left here with our notes. And then on the right-hand side, I'm going to demonstrate to you the software that I'm talking about. So our first step then was our classroom stream. So our Google Classroom, if you're not familiar, works a little bit like a hallway. So you get these class cards. These are like classrooms, literally classrooms in a hall. So in order to enter one, you just click it and you go into the class. And from here, it opens up on a classroom stream. And you'll have noticed everything these days, not just Google, works in tabs. So you're always looking around the edges of your screen for evidence of tabs. Some applications will have tabs at the bottom, some will have tabs at the top, and some will even have tabs down the side. But you're always working in looking for tabs. So think of everything in tabs as overlaid. Everything is a pile of papers, and you're just flicking to the one that you want. So our first tab, the one that it opens us up on within this classroom, is the stream tab. And the way to think about the classroom stream is that it's like if you're a social media user, your Facebook news feed, or it's like, for example, a news ticker. So the most recent thing always goes to the top of the stream. So if I announce something to my class, then when I post that on the stream, that will be at the top of my stream here. So the classroom stream works like your virtual hub. It really is the closest thing to having just a physical classroom where everyone can sort of meet and begin their learning experience with you. So you can use it to really maximize your efficiency. If you make your classroom stream your single point of information for your learners, you can then use it to share your Google Meet codes, you can use it for announcements, you can use it to encourage independent learning by publishing interesting articles and asking questions and asking other people to share. And it encourages independent learning and communication between your learners and to contribute between lessons. And obviously in a normal in-centre classroom, you would naturally, as people came into a classroom, they would chat, they would say hi, they would exchange news. And as soon as we're online, we have to work quite a lot harder to create that environment because everything you say is in front of everybody in the group. So using the classroom stream is a really non-threatening way to encourage learners to interact individually with each other. The expert tip that I just want to share with you is to schedule your posts. It's really, really a good idea, and it helps create a sense of community around your classes without really any extra effort to you at all. So if you've got a bank of useful links or interesting things or interesting topics or reminders, what you can do is you can prepare your announcement. So have a look at this article. Just put the BBC link there. And rather than click post, if I click on the down arrow just to the right of post, I can now schedule this announcement. And I'll set this to post tomorrow morning at 9:50, and I can hit schedule. And then that's now ready to go, and it's up in my saved announcements at the top, and it will automatically post. And every time something posts to the stream, it's going to send an email to all of the learners on the classroom. So it's a really fantastic way to interact with your learners as a group. So we'll just take a very quick aside, a quick tangent, and just to check that you're comfortable with how people get onto your classroom and how you can then see who is indeed part of your classroom. So a couple of quick tips while we're here. So if I just go back up to my classes, go back up to the hallway if you like, what I can do is if I've got my class here, if I click on the three dots, and the three dots is the kebab menu, and it always means more options. So what else can I do here? So I'll click this, and you can see I've got something called copy invitation link. If I copy that, that's a single clickable link that I could paste into an email, or I could, via any other mechanism, I could share with a learner. And if the learner clicks that link, they will automatically be joined onto my class. So it embeds the classroom code, and they just have to do one click link. So it's really good for digitally struggling learners who might struggle with typing in a code. If you've got all your learners on a Meet, or you've got them in a classroom and you want to give them the code, then your other option is to come underneath the name of your class, and you've got the class code there. I'll just make it bigger for you, and I can make it bigger again, for example, and that's the classroom code, which you can then share with learners who can then join your classroom by entering that code at the front page. If we just go back up into the hallway again, learners will click on the plus, join a class, and they can enter the class code that you share with them. Okay. So once we've got our learners onto our classroom, they will appear in the People tab here. And you can do some really cool stuff here. It all links together with other parts of Google. So for example, if I select all my learners, under Actions, I could then email my learners as a group. And when I click that, it will open up in Gmail, and it will have all my learners' email addresses automatically in the BCC field, meaning that I can email my learners without worrying about GDPR, because obviously if they're in the BCC field, it's not going to expose their email addresses to each other. So I can email individual students, I can email the whole group as well, but I would remind you that you don't need to if you are announcing through the stream. By default, that will then email the announcement to all your learners anyway. So just keep that in mind. It's more efficient than you having to use Gmail as a teacher. So that's the stream. We love the stream. It's great for chat. It's great for creating a sense of community. It's great for being your virtual hub. It's great for saying to learners, if you're not sure where we're meeting or what we're doing, go to the classroom stream, because if a learner asks a question on the classroom stream, the whole class will see it and anyone can answer that. And so it really helps create that shared experience. So the next piece of software, that's step 2 in our roadmap, was Google Meet. So the lovely thing about Google Meet is that you can set up multiple Google Meets. So I'm recording on this Google Meet right now, but there's nothing to stop me from starting up a new Google Meet separately. And if you don't have Enterprise Edition, then setting up multiple meets is the way that you can achieve breakout rooms manually. And with a little bit of organization, you can set up multiple meets with your learners, and that will allow you to set up breakout rooms for them. So there'll be some instructions embedded in the presentation for how to do that if you're interested. So within Meet, you can do lots of simple stuff. It's really nice and lightweight. It doesn't require learners to download any software. It is just a web page. The only exception is if they're on a phone or a tablet, they may be asked to download the Meet app, which obviously you'll be aware that everything's app-based on phones. But if they're on a computer or a laptop, then it just works straight through their web browser. So from here, we can present our screens. So that's how I'm obviously presenting to you now. So very like Zoom and Skype and so on and Teams. You've got the raise hand function, which all comes for free. I'm currently showing you, this is the Google for Education free version, so I don't have any of the fancy stuff. Also other good things I can do is I can open up a Jamboard, which we'll talk about in a moment. I can record my meetings, and I can also change my background to blur my background if I need to. And they're the really interesting bits there. Other things I can do is obviously change my view, change the layout, and just be able to make sure that I can see everybody in a grid, for example, so that it's got that sort of Zoom experience. So Meet's really simple. And the key thing is that it's your virtual lesson. And the most important skill that you and your learners need when you're using Meet is an ability to manage tabs. And the reason for that is because if we were on a Meet here with my learners and I wanted to share a material with them on the classroom, I need my learners to be able to switch to my classroom tab to be able to access that material during the lesson. So that's my sort of top tip for Meet, is to make sure that you and your learners are comfortable switching between tabs. If you've got particularly tech savvy learners, then obviously splitting your screen like I'm showing you here is a really, really good tip as well. And it's worth, again, practicing how to split your screen so that you can have multiple windows open and be seeing them at the same time. But the important skill is tab management. So from Google Meet, I can present, we can discuss, we can share. There's no hierarchy. Any learner could share their screen. So if you've got a learner that's stuck technically, if you can talk them through presenting their entire screen to you, you can then see where they're going wrong and try and help them to engage. So that is worth being aware of as well. You can also launch a collaborative Jamboard, which I've mentioned. We'll come back to those in a minute, but you'll do it from the menu. So again, there's our kebab menu again. We're going to keep seeing that kebab all the time. There's more options in there. So we click on the kebab, and whiteboard open a jam would allow us to then start a new whiteboard. It will then, when we do that, it opens up a new whiteboard and it posts into our chat the link to the Jamboard. So that happens all automatically, and everybody else who's on the meeting can now contribute to the Jamboard. So we can then all collaboratively contribute to that there. So it's a really nice little feature, but we'll talk about Jamboards in a moment. So the expert tip is breakout rooms. So even if you're on the free version, if you're on Enterprise, you'll have breakout rooms built in, which is great. So you don't need this tip. But if you're on the free version, then you're going to need Tab Muter and a really good head for organization to set it up. But once you've got the hang of it, you'll find it really simple. It's a really, really great thing to be able to do. So let's move on. Let's look a bit more closely at Jam. Let's leave Meet for a moment. So we'll just come off Meet there. And anytime I want to go to a piece of Google software, I can just type the thing that I want.google.com. So for example, if I want to go to Jamboard, I can type jamboard.google.com. If I want to go to Meet, I type meet.google.com. So I can use the waffle to access the apps. I can, of course, just search for the app, but the quickest way I find to do it is to type whatIwant.google.com. So let's go to jamboard.google.com and let's start up a whiteboard. So when in Google, anytime we want to start something new, we're looking for the plus sign. That is the icon that means new. We're looking for the plus. And in Jamboard, you can see it's down here at the bottom right. And normally the icons that we need to start something new will either be at the top left or the top right. So the general tip is, if you can't find or you're not sure where to click, always tell your learners to work around the edge of the frame. Work around the edge of the frame. start from the top left, go to top right, go to bottom right, and then bottom left, which is the least likely, and they should find the button that they need. So for us, for a new jam, we're at the bottom right, so we're going to click plus. This is going to open us up a new Jamboard. They're really simple and easy to contribute to. So we'll just name this just so we don't forget what it is. So we'll call it test. And from the Jamboard here, let's just make that a little bit bigger. You've got pen tools, which you can change the color of and the thickness and so on. So we can just create anything we want to here. We can also add sticky notes, which are really useful and a really good way of ensuring that you don't have any sort of, that things stay a little bit neater and more contained. And when you save it, it just posts on there, and you can change the color and you can move it around as well. So we can do sticky notes. The other thing we can do is we can just add typed text here. And one thing that's really nice is you can add images as well. So when we add an image in Google, it's always the same interface. You can search Google Images for a picture. Let's look for a picture of some toast. And what Google does is when it presents images to you on the Google image search, is it will only show you images that are labeled for commercial use with modification. It doesn't, Google doesn't guarantee that they're copyright free. It still expects you to do your own due diligence. However, these are images that have been labeled as suitable for use. So you have that extra layer of comfort that you're not hopefully breaching copyright when you use these images. So when you insert an image there, you know, it's one that's been labeled by Google for commercial use with modification. So with any of the components, when we've got components, we're looking for that kebab menu. You can see that we can edit, duplicate, and delete. We can move things back and forwards to layer them. We can duplicate and delete our images. And so always check, anytime you see a kebab icon, please click it and explore the options. So we can make our Jamboards, and obviously I'm making a bit of a mess here. It's not a very meaningful Jamboard. I can do shapes as well here, so we can just add some shapes. None of this seems terribly meaningful. However, what we can do with Jamboards is actually super powerful. So as well as being able to just do one whiteboard like this and use it like we would a classroom, we can also add frames. So if we click on the down arrow underneath the frame, you'll see I get some options. I can add frames either side, but what I can also do is I can duplicate the frame. So if we just get a little bit more grown up for a second, let's just delete some of these bits off. And this one we'll have to erase. I'll just do a bit of a quick job on that. So if I wanted to do something quite grown up, for example, if I had Jane and Ahmed on this Jamboard, and maybe what I'd like them to do is, for example, if we were an English class, let's see, what's our best way to do it? Let's set them up with 2 boxes. I'm using Control D to duplicate my box there, rather than Control C and Control V. I can add some text here. So for example, I could expect for pair work that I'd like Jane and Ahmed to put in some examples of adjectives and nouns into these 2 boxes here. And just to get them started, for example, I could start a sticky note and say, let's do pretty as our first example. And so I could do one as an example like that to show them what I'd like them to do. And then if I click on this drop down that I showed you here, and if I duplicate the frame, you'll see that now if I go onto the second frame, so I'm on frame 2, I could change the name. So this could be Ethan and Alina. And I've now created a collaborative pair work activity that my learners could do. So I'd be asking them to join the Jamboard. I'd ask them to find their whiteboard, their frame, and then complete the task as a pair. So it's a really, it's really good the amount you can do with it. And obviously I haven't got time to go into detail today, but also you can create images that you can then fix on the background. So you'll see you've got this set background option here. And although these ones are all quite sort of, plain, you can also add your own image. So if you create an image, for example, a structure or a table, you can then pick that up from your drive and put it in as a fixed background, meaning that your learners can't accidentally move the components around, which obviously the way I've just done it, they can, because I've just done it all within the Jamboard. So Jamboards are brilliant. Now, the question is, how do we get our learners to actually access these Jamboards? And the answer is we use the share button. So if your learners all have an email address that's linked to your organisation, then you can change the link to your organisation, and then that will be fine. You will need to make sure that your learners are editors, or they're not going to be able to collaborate on the Jamboard. If you have learners that have external email addresses, then you're going to need to set it to anyone with the link. So if they're using their own email addresses, this is the one that we'll need, and we can set them to be editors. This would then allow them to collaborate. And you'll notice that the share icon at the top has changed, and it now no longer has a padlock, which meant it was private to me. It now has a picture of a person with a link underneath, which means anyone with the link is going to be able to open this Jamboard. So what I would do in practical terms is, once I have finished the activity, I will set the share options back just to me. So I'm going to make sure that no one else can edit the Jamboard again. So I'm just going to change it again. So I clicked on the share options, and I'm going to put it back to restricted. So now my learners can make no further changes, and I've kept evidence of the work that they've done. And the last thing I want to show you in Jamboards, which is really cool, is that under the kebab menu at the top next to the share button, I can now either save the frame as an image, or I can download the whole thing as a PDF. And if I download the whole thing as a PDF, the great thing about this is I can then save it to my drive, and then I can upload it onto my classroom, so that my learners also have evidence of the work that they've done, but they can't make any further edits to it. So that's Jamboards. They're fantastic. So my expert tip, which I've already touched on, is that you can set up structure and duplicate frames for group work. They're really powerful, and they are worth exploring to see what you can do with them. So now let's hop back. Step 4, I think we're on. We're going to hop back to classwork. How do we use the classwork tab? So this would be where we go next. So if you think about how we're building this up, we've used the stream to create a virtual hub for our learners. We've used Google Meet to have an interactive live lesson. We've now brought in Jamboard to start encouraging collaboration on specific tasks. And now the next step is for us to start using classroom materials to really keep, like our class files, to keep our materials and everything in one place. So the classroom materials we keep on the classwork tab in our classroom. So let's hop over there and have a look. Key things that you must do when you're using the classwork tab are you must be organised. And so you can get things sorted by topic, by date, by session, by type, whatever suits you, but do get yourself organised and make sure that you have got, topics that make sense to your learners. Keep in mind that every time you post, you will always have the oldest thing at the bottom. The newest thing is always at the top. So my expert tip for you is to structure your materials with the oldest things at the bottom, so that the most recent stuff is always on top. What I mean by that is that if, for example, you create something new, it's just going to, so for example, if I create a new topic, it will create my new topic. There it is, and it's come to the top. But obviously that's where I want it. So if, for example, I was pre-preparing and I put topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, topic 4 in order, then what will happen is as we go along the course, my learners will have to scroll down. So every time I create, I want to create from the bottom up, so that it goes 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, for example, in my actual topics. So when you logically group your materials, you're helping prevent overwhelm. This is a test classroom, so it's very messy, so I apologise for that. But when your learners are viewing the classroom, they can hop to the topics like this. So for example, if I just wanted to see the course admin for this test class, if I click on that, it will then zoom me in and just show me that topic. The other thing that's really important in the classwork tab for your learners is that if they're in the learner view, they'll also have a link just around here, which will say view your work. And that's where they can see everything that's been assigned to them. So what we do to create materials is we have to go to the create button, and we can create a material here. And all this is us posting some information to our learners, and it could be anything at all. So if we go under add, you can see that we could pull a document from Google Drive, we could share a link, we could share a file, or we could share a YouTube video. We can also, from this screen, we can create a material directly. And if we create a material directly, the important thing just to be aware of is that it saves under your classroom folder in your Google Drive. So if you add from your Google Drive, you're effectively just simply creating a link. You're just pointing to something that pre-exists. So wherever you filed it on your drive, it's going to point to that. But if you create a document in here, Google will intelligently say, well, you've created it specifically for this classroom. So I'm going to save it in Google Drive, classroom folder, this classroom, and it's going to save it under there. So if you can't find your materials, if you create them within your classroom, they're going to be in your classroom folder on your drive. Okay, so if we do want to create something from here, we could, for example, create a slides or a docs material. If you can use PowerPoint and Word, you can use slides and docs. So let's just bypass Classroom for a minute and let's go straight to slides. Now we could go to slides.google.com to open up a view of all the slides files on our drive, but I'm actually going to shortcut even further and go to slides.new, which is going to open me up a brand new presentation. This works with sheets.new and doc.new as well. It's just a really useful shortcut. So if you want to create anything with images, my tip is to use slides rather than docs. Docs is really good for text, but with images, it struggles a little bit in the sense of if you're used to Word, you might find doing images in docs a little bit cumbersome. But there's a way around it, and you can just use a Google slide, but treat it like a doc. So here's a Google slide that is obviously very like PowerPoint. And what I'm going to do is go to File, Page Setup, and I'm going to set the size of the page to 21 by 29.7 centimeters, and that's A4 size. And from here, this looks and feels like an A4 piece of paper, and I can now use this as a document. And of course, because it behaves as presentation software, it means it's very easy for me to manage images. And if you remember, I said about images before, I can insert images from the web, so I can search the web directly from any of this software. So if, for example, we look for another toads picture, and I can insert images, and they behave very flexibly. I can move them around, I can add text around them or behind them, and I can use text boxes just to organize myself however I want. And so it's a little bit easier to use than docs. Now, everything's saving automatically to Drive. So the minute I started saving this, I'll just make this bigger so you can see it at the top, it was saving to Drive, and I know it's saved because I get the little cloud with a tick there. And if while I'm working on my presentation, I want to specifically say where on my drive I want to save it, I can use the Move button here, and I can then choose where to save it in my drive. So you don't have to go back to your drive and do your filing separately. When you're working in a document, you can specify where you'd like it to be saved by clicking on the file just there. So the last point that I just want to make about the basics of this are that, again, you can make these collaborative. So everything in Google, you can share with other people. And from a learner point of view, if I want everybody to contribute to this presentation, I can go back to my share options, and you'll see that the interface looks exactly the same as the interface we saw with the Jamboard. So I can change my link. I can say anyone in the link with the link is going to now be an editor. And this will mean that when I share the link to this document, so I can press copy link here. So that's now saved it to my clipboard. Click done. I could now share that on my Meet call. All my learners could join me on here, and we could collaboratively work on this document. And when we're finished, the important point is that I'll then go back into the share options, and I will then change it back to just me again. And what I would probably do is then share it separately on the classroom so that they had viewer rights. So the other really cool bits and pieces we can do in slides, just a few whizzy bits just to show you if you're not aware, and these work in docs as well. Sorry, some of these do. One thing I can do in slides, which is brilliant, is I can embed video. So if I insert a video here, I can directly search YouTube. Let's look for the Queen's Jubilee. And when you select the YouTube video that you want and insert it, it will automatically embed it in here into your slide. And what you can do is, if you don't want the whole video to show, you can clip the video so that only a portion of it is visible to your learners. So once this loads, which I know it's going a bit slowly because I'm asking an awful lot of it at the moment while also recording a video. If it doesn't load, we won't worry too much. Lovely. So there's the video, and you can see that I could set it to start at, say, 10 seconds in, and I could have it ending at 30 seconds in. And this would mean that the video, when I played it, would just play that 20-second clip, not the whole thing, which is really great. The other thing I can do that's really useful is I can hyperlink any objects in my slide. So for example, if I wanted, when you click the toast, if I wanted something to happen, you just select the object there. So I selected the toast, and we've got this icon at the top that looks like a chain link. That's for our link. And I could send that link to, I really don't know where that would take us, but I could send it, for example, to toast.com, and I could apply that there. And that would mean that when you click on the, oh, that looks a bit terrible, let's delete that. And so when you click on that, it would take you to whichever link that you've associated. Similarly, you can select text and you can add a link to the text. So let's find our link button there. And let's take this one somewhere a little bit safer. Let's go to bbc.co.uk. And what that will do is turn that text into a link to the BBC. So by adding hyperlinks, it makes it a real one-stop shop for topics. They're called hyperdocs. So do Google hyperdocs if this kind of thing you think this would be useful for your learners, because hyperdocs are really cool. They're basically an entire digital lesson all in one document where your learners step through everything that they need to do to learn about a topic with, you know, videos and pictures and imagery and tasks and all sorts. So Google hyperdocs for a little bit more information about those. Okay, let's move forwards. So classroom assignments is our next step. So let's hop back to the classroom. So just a reminder, I'm going to classroom.google.com. That will take me straight back to the classroom. And classroom assignments, I'm just going to give you sort of a very basic, because they're very powerful and we could easily spend an hour on them, but I'll just give you a very quick overview of what the different bits mean when you set an assignment. So first of all, quick tip on assignments, if you're new to them, is set yourself up as a learner and experience your own class. The phone experience for learners is extremely different to PC and Mac, and it's really important to understand how that process works. It's more complex, and I'm afraid it's one of those really difficult situations where, despite the fact that often our most digitally excluded learners are those on a phone, they actually have the hardest time in terms of the interface with tools, because phones are obviously not made to display large amounts of information and so on. So it is worth experiencing that for yourself so that you can understand some of the challenges that your learners might be facing. So let's have a go at just setting an assignment. So I'm in my class, my test class. I'm going to go to classwork and I'm going to go to create. And instead of choosing material this time, I'm going to choose assignment. So from here, I can label the assignment. I can add instructions. I can add any points, values, due dates, all of that sort of stuff. And what I could do is, if we can maybe say write an essay for this particular one, and I can either add something from my drive or from a file from my computer, or of course include a web link. But in this case, I'm actually going, oh, actually I will, I'll pick something from my drive. So let's see if I've just got a test document. I may be able to find my toast presentation. Let's include that. There we go, there's our toast presentation. So we're going to attach on the Google Slides toast presentation, which I'm going to say, write an essay about toast. And what I need to do is choose from these options here against the file very, very carefully. So students can view means that your students can only view that particular document. So it's like posting material. They can't do anything with it, they can just see it. If you choose students can edit the file, be really careful with that option because that's your collaborative option. If you say students can edit, what that means is students can edit the actual original file. So if I choose that option there, the presentation that I just made, and you just saw me put the picture of toast into, everybody would be able to edit that exact file. So only use this one for collaborative options, and remember to set your permissions back when you're finished if you want to retain evidence, without it being edited later. The one that's most useful for assignments is the last one, make a copy for each student. And what that does is when I click make a copy for each student, at the point that I click assign, it's like hitting go on a photocopier. So as soon as I click assign, every learner on my classroom is going to be made a copy of the Toast slides. And the reason that I'll know they've had a copy made for them is because their document won't be called Toast, it will be called Sarah Bradley-Toast. So it will have their name in the front of it. So when I click this, I'm just going to make this have no points attached to it, and I'm going to assign it. This will now mean that as a learner on this classroom, I now have something called Sarah Bradley-Toast, and that's the piece of work that I now work on and I'm going to hand back to my tutor. So my expert tip for assignments is that when you're setting an assignment, you've got an option to set it for different learners. You don't have to set it for the whole class. So for example, in fact, we can just edit the one that we've done. So here's the test assignment that we've just created. If I go back into view the assignment and click on the instructions, and if we just edit the assignment here, you can see that I set it for all students. Now I've only got one test student on this classroom, but what I could do if I had multiple students is I could set different assignments for different students. So if you've got students who need to do catch-up work or students who need extension, that's the expert tip there, is you can set different assignments for different students. Okay, so forms. Let's have this is a whistle-stop tour. We could easily spend 3 or 4 hours on forms because they're so fabulous, but I'm just going to show you really quickly how to create a form. Just a very simple exit ticket. So this is how, if you haven't used forms before, it's a really good idea to start very, very simple indeed. So we're going to start with a blank form. I went to forms.google.com. And this is how we create a form. They're really, really useful for knowledge checks, assessments, feedback. They're incredibly powerful. We're going to use this just for a simple exit ticket. So an exit ticket is just something you have to do before you leave the class, just a quick check-in. So it's the exit ticket test, and the question is, what did you learn today? This is not a very good exit ticket, but it's something. And we'll set the type to be just a short answer, so I don't want anything too lengthy. And that's all I need to do. This is an example of just the simplest possible form that I could create. What you do have to do is be mindful of your settings. So depending on how your organization is set up, you'll notice that you've got an option to restrict to users in your domain. If you have learners who use their own email addresses, you'll need to make sure you untick that box every time you create a form. So we've created our form. Let's have a quick look at how it would look to our learners. There we go, it looked like this. So what's the email address and what did you learn today? And then they can submit their answers there. Now, as I say, there's so much you can do with forms, and it's taking everything in me not to just sort of show you everything in it, but just a quick whistle stop then of some of the features. You can embed images. You can embed images into the question. You can embed images into the form as a whole, and you can embed images into the answers if you were doing sort of a picture test. You can also add a video to the form, so you could embed a YouTube video in there, and it could obviously be a YouTube video that you found, but it could also be a YouTube video you've created for that extra level of personal interaction. Other bits you can do, if you click on the paint palette at the top, you can customize the theme and choose an image for the top in the header and things like that. So you can make it a little bit more personal if you want to. That all just makes your forms just that little bit more attractive. And your expert tip for forms is that if you look up Doctor Form or Form Builder for Sheets, you can convert in bulk questions from docs or from sheets into forms automatically. It's a really, really nice, sophisticated time saver. So if you're already an expert user, please have a look at those. They're fantastic. So what we would need to do with our form is we need to share it with our learners. And my advice to you for sharing with learners, the quickest way to do it is click the preview and then copy the URL of the form, and you can then share it on your classroom or in your Meet chat or anywhere else that you'd like to use it. You could also put it in an email and send it out to people if necessary as well. So that's how we share the form links. When your responses come in, if you look to the top tabs, you've got questions and responses, and in the responses tab is where you'll be able to see all the responses that you've received. And one of my favorite features of this is you can export them out to a spreadsheet. And if you export them out to a spreadsheet, it will update in real time. So what I often do with forms is I'll export to a spreadsheet, and it's actually the spreadsheet that I'll monitor for the responses. So forms are brilliant, and I highly recommend having a play with them. You can start simple, and then the sky's the limit in terms of the complexity. So lastly then, last step of our roadmap. So when you've mastered all of that and you're feeling really good about it and you think, no, I still want more, then to elevate your teaching, these are my go-to applications for really elevating, for really making things whizzy, for making things engaging with minimum overhead on the learners. And that's critical, is that I don't like tools that require learners to have to install lots of things or learn lots of skills to use them. Anything we use, we need to take the brunt of the organization, and the learners should just see the outcome. So Screencastify is fantastic, and the link is there to the Genius training that you can take, so you can really get sort of in depth with that. The free version of Screencastify will allow you to create 5-minute video clips, which I have to say I've never felt a need to go beyond 5 minutes for short clips. And it integrates brilliantly with Drive, and I highly recommend it. I use it on a daily basis. WordWall is fantastic for creating interactive activities. So if you just want something that looks and feels engaging when you're doing presentations on Meet, then have a look at WordWall. Mentimeter is brilliant for polls, word clouds, votes and competitions. Really nice and lightweight, and again, really easy to use, and works brilliantly on phones as well. So a really nice one if you've got phone learners. And lastly, on my go-to hot tips is Mote for audio feedback. You can leave audio feedback for your learners in lots of different Google positions. You might have noticed it on my classroom earlier. You'll see that a little purple M appears because I've got the extension installed. It's a Chrome extension, so that's how it works. If I go into the sandbox test class here, and you'll see that if I just go into, let's see if we can pick one up in Classroom. Let's have a look. Oops, sorry, we'll just make that a bit bigger. So for example, if I want to go into this learner's work and leave some comments, so anywhere where I've got comment fields, I will then get my Mote icon once it loads. And you'll see this purple icon. So anytime there's an opportunity to leave a comment, Mote will allow me to leave an audio comment. This is a test. And once you add the voice note there, you can post it on. And the learner doesn't need to install Mote to hear it. When they click on the Mote comment, it will open up in a web page where they'll be able to just listen to the comment as it is. So I really like Mote as well, because I think, again, it gives that personal touch. It's so much nicer hearing somebody's voice or seeing somebody's face than just having written feedback. So that's our whistle stop tour. Thank you for your attention if you've come with me this far. I hope you picked up a few tips and tricks along the way and have a sense of just how holistic and powerful the Google tools are for creating engaging resources, setting assignments, getting feedback, and interacting with your learners in the digital classroom. So I hope that's been helpful, and thank you very much.